As Jade said, my name is Ted Johnson. I'm the Vice President of the Zephyrhills Museum of Military History. Been doing that there for about the last 20 years or so. Just a show of hands, how many people knew that there was a military museum in Zephyrhills? Okay, one gentleman. How many have been to Zephyrhills before? Oh my gosh. You guys got to come to the east side of the county for a while. Take a look at what we got over there. The museum is actually located in an old barracks building at the Zephyrhills Airport. Actually, this is a picture of the barracks building here. During World War II, the Army came in after we got involved in after Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor. The Army and the Navy came in all over the U.S. and they commandeered existing airports. Now, Zephyrhills did have a little small airport there, and they came in and commandeered these airports for their use. They used them for training. They used them for all kinds of different purposes. And they came into Zephyrhills and they said, this is an ideal place here. So they commandeered the airport in Zephyrhills, and they built about 30 barracks buildings there, all wooden structures just like this one. This is made out of wood. And it didn't look quite like that. The roofs would have been shingled, and instead of having this lapboard siding on the side, it had tar paper, black tar paper, and that was it. The buildings were made to be temporary. They weren't made to last this long. They were thrown up really quick. They were easy to build, just a typical wood frame building. And they had about 30 buildings that they built in Zephyrhills there. Consisted of latrines, mess halls, barracks buildings where the airmen would sleep. They were offices for the officers. And they had the officers and the enlisted men, there was a disparity between. So the officers would sleep in one barracks and the men would sleep in the other barracks. This is the last building remaining from those 30 buildings. They stayed there for the longest time, and I can remember growing up the buildings being there. But over the years, bums and stuff would get in there and they'd live and just squat there, and they'd start fires to keep warm in the wintertime. And the city saw it as a liability. So they gave them to the fire department to practice burn on. And they burned every one of them down except this one. And the only reason this one was saved was because the city was actually using that. The Civil Air Patrol had their meetings in there. The health department had an office in there at one time. There were several other organizations that used the building. And so they decided back in 1997 to move this building closer to the airport, which is about 3 or 4 blocks away. So they came in, they cut this building in half, put them on the back of flatbed trucks, and they hauled them about 4 blocks away, right next door to where the airport office is, where the flight office is. And they refurbished it and everything, gave it new siding on the side and all. And these buildings were there was no air conditioning back then. They were strictly, the ceilings are very high in this building, and they have little trap doors in the top. They would open on the ends of the buildings on each gable end, they had a vent. And in the summertime, they would open these little trap doors up in the ceiling, and it would allow the hot air to rise up into the attic and escape through either end. And then in the wintertime, they could close those. They had one wood-burning stove in the building, and that was it. So it was very hot in the summertime in there, very cold in the wintertime. So these guys endured a lot, not just training and going through war, but having to put up with this. This particular building here was the base infirmary. It was the base hospital. So if you were sick or you had something going on medically, that's where you go. Now it's broken up into several different rooms inside right now. That's not originally the way it would have looked. It would have been more or less wide open inside, and it would have had bunk beds, in tandem, so that the guys could lay down. That was in 1997 when they moved it over here. The museum stayed there for the longest time, and there was really nothing being done with it. The city wasn't really using it for anything at that time. And so several people that had an interest in military history and the military history of Zephyrhills came in and we asked the city if we could put some displays in there. They said we could, and it kind of snowballed. One thing led to another, and we had several members volunteer to come in and help out, and they all were military collectors. So a good portion of the collections you will see in this building are from private collections, from the people that volunteer there. And we're a 501c3. We're a nonprofit. We don't make any money off of anything. Nobody gets paid there. Matter of fact, a lot of us have put our own money into helping make the museum what it is. We just had our Battle for Veterans event this last weekend. 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that took place across the street from where the museum sits. We had Army tanks coming in. We had a reenactment battle. It was a big deal. So anyway, the 10th Fighter Squadron trained at this base during World War II. The 10th Fighter Squadron was part of the 9th Air Force. Actually, it was actually originally part of the 3rd Air Force, which the 3rd Air Force was based down at MacDill Field in Tampa, which is now MacDill Air Force Base. But when they shipped overseas, they became part of the 9th Air Force over there. The state helped out with this. Works Project Administration also helped out with it. The building was actually not in use. They started building it in 1941, shortly after Pearl Harbor. But the building didn't really get into use until 1943. And they trained fighter pilots there until 1944. And the ones that they trained there, they shipped over to Europe. And they ended up helping out with the invasion of Normandy on D-Day. They came in, they trained on the P-40 Warhawk, if any of you are familiar with those planes. It's the same kind of planes that you see at the Flying Tigers with the shark nose on the front. Of course, theirs weren't marked up like that, but that's what they trained on in Zephyrhills. And if you drive down South Avenue on either side, you'll see staggered, they look like driveways, and there's like little concrete pads over there on either side of the road. South Avenue used to be a taxiway for the planes. And when you see those out there, if you ever drive over there and you see those were the hard stands where they parked the planes. So they would park them staggered all along the taxiway. After the war in Zephyrhills, the Army came in, and after they finished training and everything and they shut down the base, it stayed vacant for a while. They sold a lot of the surplus stuff that was there to people, civilians that wanted to buy it. They offered it for sale. And then they turned it back over to the city of Zephyrhills as an airport, and it's still an airport today. And like I said, there was about 30 buildings at that time over there, and that's the only one left. Yeah, now after they got over to England, that's where they went, that's where they shipped them out to, they ended up training them in the P-51 Mustangs. Those were the newer planes that had just come. And so they cross-trained them, the P-51 Mustangs. And the air base there was also a landing strip for planes out of Orlando and out of Tampa at MacDill. And like I said, the military used the airport until October 31 of 1944. Let's see. Yeah, that's about it. It was in use, and they did a good job of training these guys, because like I said, when they were shipped over there during the invasion of Normandy, they would fly over the beachhead and they would shoot at the Germans and soften up the beachhead for the troops that were going to land. These are some of our displays, and I'm going to show you a few of the items that came from the museum. Let me tell you a little bit, I'll give you a little bit of information about this flight jacket. This is a mock-up of the jacket that would have been, the leather jacket that would have been worn by the pilots. And a lot of the fighter groups and bomber groups would adopt their own cartoon image to put on the side of their planes. This is Gus the Gremlin. He's in his little fighter plane. They call themselves the pea shooters. And if you look at this, and I'll pass this around if you guys want to look at it, he's got his little pea shooter there, and he's shooting the peas down there. So that's what they call themselves. It had the General Headquarters Army Air Forces patch. And during World War II, and a lot of you may know this, there was not a U.S. Air Force. It was the U.S. Army Air Forces. And so the Air Force was actually under the Army's jurisdiction at that time. But I'll pass this around if you all want to take a look at it. Yeah. And feel free if you have any questions to ask. Now this is the summer uniform that the guys would have worn there at the base, that the airmen would have worn there at the base. Again, it's got the General Headquarters Army Air Forces patch. They would have had their pilot's wings here. This is the prop and wings for the Army Air Forces. And they would have been commissioned as second lieutenants when they went in. So this is the, and they had the option of wearing this cap or the overseas cap. And that was a little more comfortable, I think, and probably cooler in Florida during the summertime, and it also had the second lieutenant bars on it. These went by several different names. They were overseas caps, garrison caps. Some people call them piss cutters. Why they call them that, I'm not quite sure. But the Army and the airmen, they all had nicknames for everything. Like I said, this is some of the displays here. This is our World War I display. And next to it, it's kind of hard to see because the picture was kind of cut off. But that's a Civil War display. It started out as just a tribute to the 10th Fighter Squadron there at the museum. Later on, we decided to kind of diversify and honor all of the military services of all the wars that we fought in. We are trying our best to represent all wars from the Revolutionary War all the way up to present day. However, we're running out of room. The building is just, there's a lot of stuff there to see. And like I said, if you ever have a chance to get over there, please stop by. We're open on Saturdays. Saturdays only right now from 10 to 4 each Saturday. So if you decide to come over, come take a visit. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. We have several airplanes on the property. We have a C-53D. We have an OV-1 Mohawk from Vietnam. We have a British airplane that was a trainer fighter plane. What else do we have over there? We've got, trying to think what else we had. We've got several planes over there on the property as well on display. This gives you a little. Two of the planes do. The British airplane was just moved over there not long ago, and the owner, it's in private hands, but he's just tired of dumping money into it. And they overfilled some of the tanks. It's got like 3 tanks in the wings. They overfilled one of the tanks, and it ended up catching fire underneath the plane, and it scorched the bottom of the plane. And he said, you know what, I'm done. He said, I'm tired of dumping money into this thing. And so he brought it over there. He said, you guys want this for display? We said, sure. And it's in really good shape. It was manufactured about 1978 or 79. So we said, yeah, we'll take it. So we're in the process of transferring everything over to the museum for that plane. The OV-1 Mohawk was actually taxied over to where it sits now, but it needs some work done on it to make it flyable again, or flight worthy. The FAA has certain strict rules and regulations about what has to be done to the plane to make it fly. And it probably could fly, but it needs some work done on it. So this is some more of our displays here. This is our German and Japanese display that we've got from World War II. It's primarily, most of the items that are in the museum are from World War II, but we try to represent every war if we can. This is some of our World War II display here. This is a modern day Army Dress Blues uniform that we've got on display there. And everything is marked really well, so you can go in and you can take a look. It's got cards next to it to tell you exactly what it is and who it belonged to. This is this is a 1960s era Air Force uniform. This is all Korean War. This is our Korean War room here. There's a lot of different displays, and you can kind of take a look and see what the museum looks like inside. This is Vietnam, and we've got it, and everything you see is all for that war era. Everything that's in there would have been used by these guys. We have tributes every year. We even have a room dedicated to the women in the military, especially during World War II, because they took a great part in helping here on the home front and even overseas. The government back then really didn't want to take women and send them overseas, but eventually they had to help out with different things. Now, they weren't in combat roles, but there's some of our planes there. That's the C-53D. It looks like a C-47, like what they would have, the paratroopers would have jumped out of over Normandy. But the C-53D, it was built on the same Douglas DC-3 airframe that the C-47 was. But this one was strictly used in the States for training pilots on that particular platform. So that's the OV-1 Mohawk there. Like I said, it probably could fly. Like I said, they taxied it over there when they brought it, but it does need some work done on it. And that was a Vietnam era reconnaissance plane. And a lot of people look over here and they see these right here that look like torpedoes. Those were actually drop tanks. So if they needed extra fuel, they could load those with fuel. And if they had to get out somewhere quick, they could hit a button and those tanks would drop off. These are some of the events we have. This is our Battle for Veterans. We have 4 or 5 different tanks come in. And they're owned by another person that lives over in the Kissimmee area. But this guy's got money, and he collects these things, puts them back into operational condition, and they will actually fire live ammo, by the way. But they bring them over there, they load them up with blank ammunition, and they have battles over there. It's quite something to see, actually. These are some of our other events we've had. These are some of the guys that helped work on putting the C-53 together. We got it, it came in on the back of 2 flatbed trucks in pieces. It took us about 2 years to reassemble that thing. It had been in a junkyard up in Florala, Alabama. And when they needed to move it around somewhere, they'd just take a forklift, punch it in the side, pick it up, and move it. So we had a lot of repairs to do on it to make it look like it does now. And that's what it looks like out there. We have vehicles that one of our president, Cliff Moffitt, he collects military vehicles, mostly from World War II. And he brings all of those over there and puts them when we have different events so that people can see the vehicles. Like I said, we're open Saturdays from 10 to 4. And that's the address. And I meant to bring some business cards, and I completely forgot it. But I've got some pamphlets up here if you all want them. I think that's about it. We do not charge any admission. We don't charge for parking. We don't charge for anything. If you want to buy a book or magazine or something like that, we do charge for those. But we try to leave it open for people to come in, and we run strictly off of donations. So.
You mentioned you had some kind of an event just recently. How many events do you have during the year?
Let's see. At the beginning of the year, we have, in September, we honor the 9/11 tragedy. We have a Pearl Harbor event that's coming up on Saturday, December 7th this year. We honor Pearl Harbor. We do the Battle for Veterans in November every year on Veterans Day weekend. I'm trying to think what else we do. We have quite a few events.
Don't you do reenactments as well?
Yeah, the Battle for Veterans was a reenactment. But we have vendors out there, food vendors. We have vendors that are vending military paraphernalia. If you want to come in and try to buy something. We have reenactors there with displays set out so you can see some of the stuff that was used, kind of like what I got up here. So you can see some of the equipment that was used during the different wars. And so we have reenactors come out. We have Japanese, we have German, we have American, and
Do you have any flyovers?
we have. We didn't have any this last weekend because there was nobody available. And we've had the Collings Foundation bring their B-17 and B-24 Liberators in a couple of times, if they're available. And it's hard to book them. It's very hard to book them in. But we usually, if you go to our website, it's zmmh.org. Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Let's see what we got here. No, you can go to our events page on there and see everything that we got planned.
The events are free too, right? All the events are
Yes, yeah, we don't charge admission for anything.
You have parking for general aviation?
Yes, sir.
It's right on the airport.
It's right there at the airport, yeah. We get planes flying in all day long, flying in and out. Matter of fact, our museum is right in line with where they fuel up the planes.
No tanks, so.
We don't have any tanks yet. We're hopeful. There's quite a lot to see there. You can spend a good hour and a half, 2 hours there, I think, you know.
Zephyrhills now seems to be known for its huge amount of skydiving.
The Skydive City, which is the parachute center, is on the other side of the airport. We can stand out on the back porch of the museum and watch them come down. Yeah.
During the training, was that part of, were there a paratroop area?
You know, they really didn't give the pilots much training on how to bail out of their planes. They told them how, but they didn't actually practice that. So a lot of these pilots, if they had to bail out of their planes, it was a one-time thing. They didn't know, you know. And they used seat parachutes, which they would put the harness on before they got in their planes. The parachute was actually their seat cushion. And they would get into the plane, the fighter plane, because it was a single-seat fighter plane, and they would hook into the seat cushion. So they would be able to sit on the cushion, on the seat, which had their parachute packed in there. If they had to bail out, they'd run the canopy back, stand up on the seat, stand up, and they'd put that behind them, and they'd get out on the wing and they'd jump.
That's a lot to do when your plane's going down.
I think if my plane was going down, I could do it pretty fast. Yeah. You don't want to go down with that plane. Any other questions?
What else did you?
Yeah, let me show you some of the equipment up here. This is some of the stuff from the museum. This is a this is one of the belts that would have been worn by the soldiers overseas, and it is heavy. And each one of these pouches have clips. And I'll show you what's in here and I'll pass it around. Each one of these pouches have clips with 30-06 rounds in them. Now these rounds are all inert. The primers have been taken out of the back, so they won't fire. But these would load 8 rounds, and this rifle, the M1 Garand, General George Patton called this the greatest battle implement ever devised. They would load this thing up, because every other combatant during World War II used guns that you had a bolt action, where you had to, each time you wanted to fire, you had to pull it back, rack another round into the chamber, and then fire, aim and fire. This one, you pull this back, this would go in like this. Now this one won't do that because this has been demilitarized. But that would go down inside, and when that went forward, it would put your first bullet in. So they could shoot this continuously 8 times, one after another, but just pulling the trigger. They didn't have to work this at all. And they could do that, bam, 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 8 times until they ran out of ammunition. And these clips, these metal clips here, Once the last round was spent, this would lock back and it would eject the clip out. And you could hear a distinct ping. That's what the sound they would make. And there was a myth, and I'll say it's a myth, that the Germans would listen for that ping, and when they heard that, they'd know that the soldier was out of ammo and had to reload a clip in. Now, personally, I think that's more myth than fact, because during the heat of battle, everybody's shooting and everything, you're not going to be able to hear this. But
And one person's ping doesn't mean the soldier next to him.
exactly, yep. Here, I'll pass this around. You guys want to look at this?
Right, exactly.
Pretty wood.
Yeah. Y'all want to take care of it? This is about 8.5, 9 pounds. This is a dummy. This is a reproduction.
Okay.
The actual M1 Garand, and this was made by John Garand. He was the one that invented this. The actual rifle weighed about 10 pounds. And in addition to all this he was carrying, that's in the belt that he was carrying, he had to carry that. And he had to wear this. And this is an actual World War II helmet. And it's fairly heavy as well. So these guys, you know, that's why war is fought by 18, 19, 20-year-old guys. Thank you, sir. I'll leave all this stuff up here for a while in case you guys want to come up and take a look at it. But each one of these pouches that you see on here had this in it. Matter of fact, I'll pass this around if you all want to look at it.
So do you still have the gunpowder?
No, the primer and everything's been taken out. Yeah. Now, the uniform I'm wearing is the Class A uniform. They would have worn these to USO dances, to church on Sundays. If they were going out, you know, to eat at a restaurant or something on Friday or Saturday nights, they would have worn their Class A's. And of course, it's got the second lieutenant's bars. It's got their wings. And if they were issued these at the end of the war, they would wear their ribbons on here. And the ribbons, this yellow one is the American Defense Service ribbon. If you were in service of the U.S. military, either years ahead or just prior to World War II, you received that ribbon. And these all had medals that came with them, but they didn't get the medals until after the war, because you couldn't wear them on your uniform anywhere anyway. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
When did the Army Air Force transition to the Air Force?
In September of 1947. Yeah. They then became the U.S. Air Force, United States Air Force. And it was a separate branch from the other services. I was trying to think what else I got here. So the belt. See if I can get this back in. So on this set of suspenders here, they've got their bayonet in here, which they could attach to the front of their rifle if they needed to. They've got a first aid kit, and this consisted of this little can here. You'd pull this tab, and it would unzip all the way around. Inside, there was a sulfur powder, there was a tourniquet, and there was a I was trying to think, it's a painkiller. Morphine. It was a morphine syringe. So it wasn't much in there, but it was enough to kill the pain. And if you had an injury that was bleeding profusely, you could put the tourniquet on there and put the sulfur powder, which would help the blood clot. So that's basically what it was for. It was kind of a makeshift thing until they could get them to the base hospital or get them to a hospital somewhere or a medical tent. And this is original, by the way. This is original here. Never been opened. They had their shovel. They had their shovel, which was called an entrenching tool. And that's the reason they called it that. Was you see it's got the short handle on it with the handle. This actually belonged to my grandfather. He brought that back from Europe with him. But it was an entrenching tool, and that's what it's for digging trenches. That's why they didn't carry around long-handled shovels. You had your canteen for water to keep yourself hydrated. What else we got here? They also had, a lot of times they would attach their hand grenades to the top of it, and they would fasten them in place with friction tape. So that they rode up here on your chest. They were easy to grab, so you could pull that friction tape off, grab it, pull the pin, and toss it. This was a grenade, but it's been demilled. The bottoms were cut out, and they took out everything that's explosive. Yeah, I was telling you about the ribbons up here. The second ribbon, the blue one, is the American Defense ribbon. If you were in the service during World War II at any point during the war, you got the American Defense ribbon. And the final one over here is the European, African, Middle Eastern ribbon. So if you served in any of those theaters of war, you got that ribbon as well. And like I said, they came with medals with them also. But most of these guys weren't worried about them. As a matter of fact, a lot of them came home with their uniforms, and the medals were not in any kind of order or anything. I think most of them were just happy to be going home. Everything I'm wearing is original except for the shoes. The cap's original, the uniform's original, my wristwatch is original to World War II. The ring, everything's original.
It's a good thing you saved it, because the Army's going back to that uniform.
They did. They went back about a year ago. Yep. Honestly, I think it's a good-looking uniform. But the ones that they issued to the guys now just don't look as sharp as the World War II uniforms. Most of the officers, and like I said, there was a disparity between the officers and the enlisted men. Enlisted men, their uniforms are made out of 100% wool. This is like a gabardine material, so this was an officer's tunic. Wasn't any cooler, but it was what it was. Can I answer any more questions?
How do they do food? Did they have what they call them, the MDA meals back then, and what they do for
Meals ready to eat.
food?
Yeah, they weren't called MREs back then. You had K rations, C rations, same thing. They were all boxed up. Yeah, and they were easy to prepare in the field. So you could use the cup out of your canteen, and you could heat it up over and put that stuff in there with a little bit of water and heat it up. Didn't make it any better.
Hot sauce was any of it edible?
Yeah, I was going to say it didn't make it any better. Most of the MREs, even now, you heat them up. They're all right, but they're not anything to speak of.
But you got that little key with that K ration to open those things.
Yep. Any other questions? Well, we'd be happy to see you at the museum sometime. Come over, like I said, Saturdays 10 to 4, every Saturday. Yeah, sure.